Greetings, everyone.
Greetings.
It is our tradition to bring our ancestors into all of our discussions, all of our meetings, all of our gatherings, because in our tradition, that's part of our family. It's not seen as people who are dead or gone or in the cemetery or another part of town. Our ancestors are always with us, so we need to make them feel welcome. Some people may have problems with this because it appears to be in contradiction to other things, but this is our tradition. It goes everything from the brothers on the corner who are opening up a bottle of wine and they pour a little bit first. We want to make sure that everybody who's supposed to be there is there. Of course, at the same time, we want to make sure that everybody who's not supposed to be there is not there. But that's a whole other discussion. So I'm going to say some words. You can say ashe for every point that I make. If you are in agreement with it, ashe essentially means we agree, we are in accord. Call on our ancestors, far and near, fathers of our fathers, mothers of our mothers, to bear witness to what we are doing here today.
Ashe.
Call on the Creator, who our ancestors considered, and we should still consider to be our oldest ancestor, to be present here today for us.
Ashe.
Call for the deities, spirit, all spiritual manifestations, all the power in the universe that is about the business of African liberation, empowerment, and sovereignty to be here.
Ashe.
We call on those ancestors whose example we stand beside, those ancestors who we call because of our pride, because we love them. As you call out the names of some of those ancestors which you may know, I start out with John Henry Clark. Ashe. Ashe.
Marcus God.
Ashe.
Yeah, Santiago.
Ashe.
Elijah Muhammad.
Ashe. Ashe.
Ellen Mack.
And we'll ask those ancestors who are of our direct lineage. We will call out their names because we want them to be present too. And I'll start out with Molly McKissick.
Mary Casey Beck.
Ashe. Ashe.
Big Mama Kota.
Ashe.
Daddy Richardson.
Ashe.
Jasper Martin.
Ashe. Ashe. We call on all of those who are on the front line today, who are doing this work, who are about the business of improving the quality of life of African people. We call on all those individuals who are our children, who are, if you will, warriors in training, who are preparing to do the work in the future that we will be proud of. With that said, Ashe, 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 oh.
Tuere, and I'm here to welcome you all to this African naming ceremony. I just want to give you all kind of like a brief overview about African naming. I was going through some of the African naming books that I have at home this week and remembering when I changed my name, and the books, inside of the books, and in a lot of the studies and the experiences that I've had, oftentimes people give the names to the children. And when, when any of us who've given birth or who's experienced a birth, that parents go through the agony of trying to decide between one name or another, between which relative or which person's father to name the child after, or things of that nature. And in the African tradition, everything, first of all, comes from African tradition, because as we all know, civilization began on the continent of Africa with Black people. So anything that we're doing now came from there to begin with, although with the time that's passed and whatnot, things have changed around. We've gotten used to certain other variations of names and of rituals and things of that nature. But with the traditional African names, we find that there are meanings behind them. There are meanings behind the American names that we have as well, but oftentimes we don't select a name because of those meanings. We select a name because it sounds nice. Okay, we're gonna name her Sheila. We're gonna name him Darnell because we like that name. Oftentimes, and what I was reading recently in some of the naming books is that sometimes because we like the way something sounds because of what we're used to, we don't realize that there's a meaning behind it. And without knowing or doing the research and knowing what those meanings behind those names are, we could be putting an energy on our children that we don't really want, or we don't really realize that's the energy we're trying to put behind it. So with the African naming ceremony, whether you're selecting a name for your child, your newborn, or whether you're selecting a name for yourself, you have the advantage of having the information behind it, of having the meanings, where the origins of these names are, what different ethnic groups or families that they came from, and what they mean. Like, for example, I'm not sure if it's the Yoruba or Akan, but one of them is you name your child or yourself by the dead. Akan. That's Akan. Okay, Yoruba is so Akan is the Kwame and Kweku and my middle name is Aku because I'm on my list. So Yoruba is something else. What's the other one? Well, there are different ethnic groups, different African ethnic groups that have different traditions that if you choose one of theirs, it follows. But the main point is that there's meaning behind the name. And the meaning that you select doesn't necessarily have to be something that you already are. But it is, even for when you give your child a name, that child is newborn, so that child isn't already, a gymnast or an artist or things like that, but this is what you are hoping that person aspires to be. It's the same when we as adults select a name for ourselves. It's something that if someone else is naming you, it's something that the community has seen from you, and the community looks at you as being this person or this type of person, or one who opens doors for others, or one who reflects the Almighty, or things of that nature. Or it could be something that you personally are aspiring to be. You write and you want to be a poet or a writer, or you do some things with wood and you want to be an artist, or whatever the case may be. So I'm sorry if I'm rambling.
No, you're not.
So that is the ritual that we are experiencing today. So Brother Donald has I don't know, have you taken a name or were you given a name?
I was given a name.
Okay, Brother Down has been given a name based on how he's presented himself in the community. And it's an honor to be given a name by the community because no matter what you think you are or think you're not, because sometimes we think we are more than we are, but there are sometimes we think that we are less than what we are. And the community oftentimes comes back and gives you its reflection of what you really are, and it's an honor to have that because it's always born out of positivity, born out of love, born out of respect. And so that's what we're going to be experiencing here today. And so I think I've said all that I can think of to say. So without any further ado, let's begin the ceremony.
institution in our community. And Mama Tuere, her reputation greatly precedes her because she doesn't mince words, and when she talks, she speaks the truth. So we're honored to have her here. I'm saying this because it says something about the choices that he made. Because he chose who was going to be here to reflect this important event in his life. And to me, this is a very, very important event. When he came to me and he asked me for a name for him, I at first didn't want to do it because that is an enormous responsibility.
Yes.
You have to look at this individual who I've known, but you have to look at this individual and assess what you want to say about their character now and what you want to say about the kind of person that they are trying to grow into. As she just said, it's not there's no such thing in our tradition as a name, like we have art for art's sake. There's no such thing as a name just for that name because it sounds good, because it's rhyming, or because some relative had it. If that relative has no qualities that you want to have carried forth, you name a child or you name a person after the best that they can be. This is also part of our tradition. This is a little tangent right here, but this is also part of our tradition. Proverbs speak to our heart. There are more thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of African proverbs, and I have yet to come across one that would lead us in the wrong direction. All of us are trying to improve the quality of who we are. So names in our tradition are extremely important. And when I looked at this man, I came up with 3 names, and I want to say them, and I ask you to say them with me. His first name is Ajamu. Middle name is
Kazemde.
And his last name is Ajamu.
Ajamu.
Now, Ajamu means righteous. The first 2 names, in fact, speak more to the character that I know in this man. When we say righteous, we're talking about somebody who's always trying to be correct. Somebody who's always trying to do the right thing. Somebody who's always trying to help other people. He reminds me of Young. If he was much younger, he was in school and he got into a lot of fights. I could guess that all his fights were about an issue of right or wrong. He would be trying to correct something. So when I look at him, he's always trying to make things right. He's always trying to make things correct. And this really works with the second one because I also see him as an ambassador. He does things that I wouldn't do. He finds people who he thinks may not know or may only know slightly, and he's about the business of trying to make them understand. He sees himself, I would argue, as an ambassador from our ancestors. So his job is to deliver the word. And he continues to deliver the word. I've never known him not to be doing that.
Exactly.
Trying to make people understand who they are, trying to make people understand their power, trying to make people act righteously without fear, in service to the children, in service to the community. And of course, the last name, he fights for what he wants. He's a fighter. He's a fighter. He's not going to take anything sitting down. There's a lot of courage here. And he may not necessarily see it in those same terms, but it takes a lot of courage for you to stand on what's right in a reality that's very wrong. It takes a lot of courage for you to decide in a reality that is moving against us or has moved against us systematically for the last 2,000 years to choose to move back and forward to your ancestors. And some people may say, well, what difference does it make with the name? When we talk to the children all the time, sometimes they don't understand, and we'll say, well, if you want to come to school in goth outfit, all black and fingernails and all the rest of that, nobody's going to say too much. In fact, if you want to come to school in lederhosen from Germany and your little sandals on, nobody's going to say anything. But if you come to school in African attire, it's going to be a problem.
Yes.
So subconsciously, we know that there is a problem. And he has chosen to accept that responsibility.
Yes.
This is a choice that he made. And nobody convinced him. If you're going to become your ancestors, that's a choice that you have to make on your own. Nobody can make that choice for you because you have to stand on your own 2 feet. You have to stand like a man on your own. So the names that were given to him, Kazemde Ajamu, these were given for a reason because they reflect his character and they reflect where I see him going. I don't see any of those things having a reason to change in this man. When we talk about changing names in our tradition, and to our tradition as people who we're not lost, we're just finding our way back home. When we're talking about that, then we're talking about making a choice that is a choice of power. And this is an exercise of power on his part. This is an effort for him to define himself as an African for the world. That is an act of power. To name yourself, what is the saying said, only dogs and things don't name themselves. We're supposed to be naming ourselves. And this is a choice that he has made. So this is an act of power. One of our elders in the community, in fact, one of our elder martial artists in the community, whose name is Balagoon, he said, and I quote, "Your name is your mission, your power, and your challenge." Your mission, your power, and your challenge. And we need to break that down for those of us who have names who have meaning, that has meaning. When you name yourself, or you are named by the community, and this would be named by the community, when you name yourself, then you have identified what you're going to be doing. My name is Mwalimu Baruti. And Mwalimu, which really isn't a name, it's a title. Whenever someone calls me, whenever someone says my name, it reminds me of what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I'm supposed to be a teacher. Mwalimu means teacher. So I'm supposed to teach. And if I ever lose track of that, when I hear my name, and this is the purpose in our tradition of names, to remind you of what you were supposed to be about, to reground you in your mission, in your purpose. So whenever he hears Adagun, he knows he's supposed to check himself and see whether he's being righteous or not. And this, of course, is a responsibility that all of us carry, because we are a community, we are people, just like it takes a whole village to raise a child. It takes a whole village to maintain a man. It takes a whole village to maintain a woman. So each of you has a responsibility. Whenever you see him out of line with any of these, or slowing down with any of these, you have a responsibility to call his name. It's like back in the day when your mother called your whole name,
Yes.
John said, you knew you were in trouble. You knew that something was wrong and you need to stop and think. He has been told his responsibility. Whenever he hears his name, he's supposed to stop and think, am I in accord with this description of me? Am I being the kind of person that I have determined before the community to be? Also, it's your, and this one is, I guess, the hardest to explain. I don't know if I can explain. When you name yourself, when you decide who you are, what you're going to be, that's a power that's not measurable. That's a power that no one can take from you. Sort of like when we were told back in the day, that's something they can't take from you, what's in your head. It's that kind of power where you're in charge, where you know, where you identify where you're going, and no one does that for you. You named yourself, and you accepted the name for yourself. You accepted the responsibility for that name. And it's also a challenge. Because there's no such point at which he will become righteous, and that's it. He has to continue to become more and more and more and more righteous in his life. Just like we move from knowing information to having a little knowledge to having some wisdom as we get older, he's going to have to become more and more righteous. He's going to have to be the one who stands as a righteous person, as an example for those who are coming behind him. That's his work. This isn't an ordinary ceremony. This isn't a gathering of family for a dinner so that we can, have a family reunion or something. This is a very serious, solemn event where he's taking on a responsibility. It's not just a name. This is a responsibility. He has a responsibility to his ancestors. He has a responsibility to those people who created the language that these names came out of.
Yes.
So this is a very, very solid, credible statement of his choice to be African. And folks need to understand, we're not just talking about African American. We're talking about going back to who we're supposed to be in terms of our roots and bringing people there, making people understand. It takes a particular type of mind to move us in that direction. And the think black thing, that's doing that. So you already started on this process. You already have the name. It was just a matter of attaching words to what you're already doing. Now, in this ceremony, and in most African ceremonies, there are degrees of similarity. There is no such thing in any African society that I have encountered where symbolism was not involved. In the Afrikan society, you can tell a woman is married because she'll wear a certain number of layers of lapas around her. So you'll know everything carries a symbol. There's no such thing as art for art's sake. There's no such thing as name for name's sake. There's no such thing as things for things' sake. So all of these ingredients that we have here that Brother Ajamu is going to taste are symbolic. Okay? They stand for something. He's supposed to carry these tastes in his mouth and in his mind for the rest of his life. So we're going to start out with the strongest of them. This is liquor, alcohol, whatever you want to call it. It's a very strong beverage, and this is supposed to remind him of his connection to his ancestors because he comes from some strong roots. They are deeply grounded in the earth, Sasaya, Mother Earth. And what he is partaking of now is everything that he has always been, the strength of that.
Shay.
Okay. Now the next is palm oil. Palm oil symbolizes the fact that there are going to be things in life that are going to be harsh. We talked about some of them. Because he has changed his name, there are going to be some people who do not understand. There are going to be some people who will not respect that.
Yes.
Even they will not respect his choice. And he has the right to choose. So we have to understand that in this reality, there are going to be things and people who are adverse to him becoming who he is. So this is supposed to remind him that that's going to come. It's going to come. There are going to be difficulties. Every day is not going to be sunny. You're going to need to remember. You're going to need to remember. Now, honey in a way does the opposite. Honey balances it out. And we are people that are big on balance, order, harmony, complementarity. We want everything to be balanced. We recognize it's going to be good, and we also recognize that it's going to be bad. So the honey that he's about to take now, this honey is supposed to symbolize the goodness that's going to come as a result of him accepting this name and acting on it.
Shay.
Now the next ingredient, I'm supposed to give these to you. The next thing, that's a lot of salt. The next ingredient is salt. Now salt, as we know, is a preservative. It keeps things fresh or keeps things good for long periods of time. So this salt, in a very special way, is supposed to make sure that you are stable, that your name, your character continues as it is, and it doesn't change, and it doesn't deviate so far from the path that you don't recognize yourself and your name anymore.
Shay.
Now the next one is my favorite. This is Cayenne. Cayenne, even more than the palm oil, represents harsh times. When I started on this path, an elder sister gave me an Adikwa symbol that's called the chin chin. The chin chin is sort of shaped like a ladder, and I didn't realize what it was about when she gave it to me. I just took it as a gift. But the chin chin is about struggle, about the difficulty that comes along when you decide to take a new path. Even though his path isn't going to be that different, he's going to be, yes it is, it's going to be very different. It's going to be very different. Because the things that you're going to have to do, you didn't have to do before. You got to stand up for your name. So this Cayenne represents the difficulty, the struggle that comes along with the name that you have adopted. And the next is Coconut. Coconut stands for longevity. We want you to live long. One of the problems that we have today is that those people who are our best don't live long enough to pass on what they need to the younger generation. So we want him to live long. We want him to continue to grow in the wisdom of his name and to demonstrate this in terms of his example to those who are coming along behind us. So Coconut reflects that, or is an example of that. Coconut is for all the blessings that you will receive as a result that you can't see now. Big Black is going to do some wonderful things for African people. It's going to open up a lot of eyes, a lot of minds. It's going to turn a lot of the young folks in the direction that they need to be turned. So coconut for all those blessings that you're going to get that you don't see now. Water. Water is the final ingredient. Water represents, we'll put it in a nutshell, coolness. There's four top chefs that came out with the song Still Waters. And in that song, even though it is a love song, for me the symbolism is that when we do this work, we need time as peace. We need to have peaceful minds. We don't need to have chaos in our heads. And for me, this is supposed to represent, or supposed to command you or instruct you to find peace as you move along. Not having everything constantly working, struggling all the time. And struggling, of course, can be good. What they call the beautiful struggle. This is going to be a beautiful struggle. But while you're struggling, you need time, peace, so that you can gather yourself, so that you can be who you are, and peace with yourself and your family. With that done, my brother, I want to say something simple like I love you. I honor you. This is a step that most people do not have the courage to take. Know that we are here for you, and we will make sure that you stay along the path. Family, welcome.
Thank you everyone for coming. closest friends and family. My daughter's here. She came up from Savannah, so I'm here. So my daughter. Some of my used to Jegna, and for a short description of Jegna, that would be teacher, one that stands upright, Mwalimu Baruti. Just did the ceremony. Rudy's in my ear practically every day about something. And his partner, Johnny Clark and his wife. My Stebbins family. And that is a family. For those of you that are not in the Stebbins community, we're truly a family. We fight like sisters and brothers, close. Chorus band, Cheryl.
I thought there was an NA.
And you are?
David Williams.
David Williams, thank you for coming. I just met this sister that's doing yeoman's work in the community, Dr. Vincent. I'm never at a loss of words, but I am at a loss of words because this is really an awesome moment for me. And I appreciate everyone who's come out and stood with me and experienced this with me. This is truly a journey. And Mwalimu Baruti said something that really stuck with me, is that you're going to remind me of my mission, my purpose. When I first saw the name and the meaning of the name, I stuck on the first name. How do you? Because that means righteous. And I said, oh, I got a challenge. Those that know me well know this. And for those that know me well from experiencing this, every time I look at you, Cora, or Cheryl, or Melanie, or Ken, it's like, I know I have to live up to that. Because I know my sisters, and I know Sophia, I know you're going to hold me accountable, my wife. Oh, wait a minute. Oh,
Yeah.
oh, wait a minute. I was saving her for last year, like I promised. I would not be following the path that I am. She's put up with me. Some of you people already know. It's a struggle, but we managed. Our 12th year anniversary is December 21st. We got that. For those of us that know, so thank you. You have to be a little patient as we lay out the food so we can partake. Oh, this something. We wanted to take an opportunity that if there are any questions, if anyone needs any clarity or have any questions or they didn't quite understand something that was said, that we would open up the floor. So this can be a teaching moment for all of us. We include. So if anyone have any questions of my myself, Tuere, Mwalimu Baruti, his lovely wife, Mama Ya, please, by all means, ask the question. Now, I know some people got some questions about that. Come on now. Yes, Papa.
I'm interested in why did you decide to name yourself?
That's a very good question. I want to go back to 1995. And I'm going to start the story. I worked at this bank and they had this after-work networking thing in this bar at the Sheraton Hotel in New Jersey. And we used to go there every Friday after work. And I met this beautiful sister, excuse me, for this story. You know, single brothers, you know where your mind is when you meet a beautiful sister. And I was talking to her and I was interested, but the only thing she was interested in was educating me, opening up my eyes, awakening me. And I would go over to her house sometimes and we sit down and she would just talk with knowledge. And she would stop right in the middle of what she was saying. She'd say, brother, you need to read. And I was like, I can retain anything that you tell me. I don't need to read. I didn't want to read. I wasn't interested in reading. And not too long after that, I'm from New Jersey. I was downtown New York shopping for some clothes. And there was a Muslim outdoor book sale on Broad Street in New York. And I was thumbing through the books, and I saw this book, Everything That They Never Taught You in History Class. I can't think of the author. Do you know the author about one?
We have a problem.
But Everything They Never Taught You, and I took that book home. And for probably the first time in my life, when I opened up a book, I didn't stop until I finished it. And I read for probably several more years, and then I stopped reading. Moved to Atlanta, got married, living my life, and then probably about 3-4 years ago, something made me pick up a book again. But this time it was different. But before it was just learning the history of our people. And this time, as I started reading the history, and I wish Nia from the New Bookstore could have been here, because she was really instrumental in this. I started understanding that you can't just learn the history of your people without the spiritual aspect of it. Just like in this society, there's a separation between church and state. That's not who we are. That's together, it's one. You can't have one without the other. And as I got more into it and had a better understanding of it, I realized that if I really wanted to be centered in African philosophical and spiritual thought, that I had to make a transition. I had to have a rebirth, if you will, to be reborn again. And part of that rebirth was renaming myself and walking the walk and talking the talk, and more importantly, doing the work. I mean, I think we all realize and recognize that we could sit around and talk about all the issues and all the problems all day, every day. But seldom do we take upon ourselves, each individual, to do something. Do your part, however small, however large it is, that we have a responsibility to our people collectively, not as an individual. I am because you are, therefore you are because I am. So when I look at you, Michael, I see a reflection of me. So that whole transition that started taking place, it was a rebirth, so I needed a name to go with that. An interesting story, if you will. Mama Nia, when I would go in her bookstore, she said, you need to read this book. And the title of the book was You Reason. And that was my first book that I read from Mwalimu Baruti. Probably, how many books have you authored? 19. I probably read 8 or 9 of them. And I knew then that I wanted to learn from him. That I wanted to, we used to hear all the time that a lot of our elders sat at the foot of a John Henry Clark. Yet, how do we have the opportunity to sit at the feet of our scholars, of people that are out there doing the work, our gems? And I started reading more of his book, and then I finally got a chance to meet him. And I knew then, that was over 2 years ago, 3 years ago maybe, I knew then that one day I was going to ask him, I selected him, I guess if you will, or the ancestors selected him, I should say, to give me my name. And I waited until this past spring to ask him. So that's how I came to wanting to do that. Long story, I had to tell you the whole story.
That's all right.
Melanie will tell you, I tell everything long. I don't tell anything short. So if you ask me a question, be prepared for a long answer. Any other questions? Yes.
First of all, thank you very much for explaining the names. When I came here, I was very familiar with Kazemde. Now I can say I can, based on your explanation. So thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
As with any decision we make, we consider all aspects of that decision. And not too negative, this is actually a very positive question. So when you decided to take this step, did you consider what if you don't want to do this anymore? How did that conversation or that mindset go?
Good question. I wish my mother was here because I would take her back to 1967. I was 7 years old. And I've always had two things that I like, history and psychology. For whatever reasons, I like both of them. And I remember sitting in class. I went to an all-white Catholic school. And I remember sitting in class and I'm seeing these portraits of Jesus as a Caucasian. And I remember looking in history, I remember looking at the maps of Africa in relationship to Israel. And I remember thinking, how is that possible?
Right.
Right? And I remember going home and I'm saying to my mother, what's up with this? This doesn't make sense. And at the time, bless her heart, she said it doesn't matter. And to her, it didn't matter, but to me, it did. And it's no fault of hers, but to me, that's generational, I think. To me, it did. So I took you back there because this is something that was always in me. I always questioned from the time that I was a child, why? You know, in fact, you know, my mother used to get upset because I said, why? You know, you can relate to that, right, Dan? Why? Right? Everything was always why. Things just always didn't line up for me.
Right.
And I never quite understood why they didn't, but I knew it was something in me. It was an ancestor speaking to me in some kind of way that was saying, question, ask the questions. And then once you start asking the questions, then you start getting the answers, then you start evolving out of that. So I sort of like to say that I realized that it's always been with me, and it always will. I just didn't know what to do with it. You know, and there was a time when all I did was read. And I said, well, I'm not engaging. I'm not talking to others. I'm making relationships. And interesting enough, there was people that was among me, Melanie feels, that grew up in the same type of environment that I didn't even know. We weren't even communicating about these things. So it's always been a part. And actually, I would venture to say, it's a part of all of us.
Yeah.
We just tend to turn off to that side for whatever our reasons, good, bad, or indifferent. So it's not a knock, but it's there. It's within us. It's what do we again decide to do about it? And if you're living good and everything's fine, you may not ever decide to do something, and that's fine, I guess. And if you decide to do something about it, that's fine too. But I know that's who I am. I think it probably took me 50 years to realize this is the path that I should be taking. This is the route that I should be going. This is my purpose. So that's where I'm at.
Can I say something in regards to what you just said?
Yes.
You said it may have taken you 50 years to realize that. Okay, now I'm going to go back to that same year, 1995, in Detroit. I'm from Detroit. I was riding in the car with Winston. We were going to, I was really active. I think that the people are most active on the front lines when they're in their 30s because we was out there marching with signs and everything. But this was during that time we were going to some meeting. I don't know whether it was the Shrine or whether it was the New Guardian movement or the New Panther movement or whatever it was. And I was talking about some time in my life prior to that. And I used the phrase, you know, back before I was conscious. And she stopped me in the middle. I don't even remember what we were talking about. She said, you've always been conscious. You just didn't know it. And you say that, you know, it may have taken you 50 years, but in your story, you already presented to us or explained to us how it was always there.
Right.
Now that I'm in the same age group as you, and so I have time, or I have had the time to reflect back on some things that I hadn't really connected the dots. But I'm looking back at my 7th grade picture. It's a picture, it's not the school picture. It's a picture that I'm the same person I always was. I snuck a camera in the school, you weren't have a camera in there. But it's a picture of me and a few of my classmates. And all the little girls have their little hair all curled and stuff like that. I'm standing there 13 years old or 12 in the 7th grade doing like this with an afro. And this picture was like in a group of pictures that I found that had been packed away forever. I had forgotten about that. I remember that I asked my mother for an afro in 3rd grade, but I did not connect all of that. And so like you're talking 67 and 68, I had an afro. In 73, I had an afro. I know again in the 80s, I had an afro. But then, you know, being female in this society, we go back to what's mainstream. So, you know, I look at the picture now, I'm like, I see why I didn't have a boyfriend in the 7th grade because, you know, I'm with afro, glasses, and black power. But like you, like the experience that you just described, I've had that same thing, but like you say, we live in a society, we don't know what to do with it. You know, we watching Soul Train and trying to do locker and break dancing and, you know, and things of that nature as we're coming up through the society. And so oftentimes, and you know, some of you may be going through the same thing or may have gone through the same thing, or we all may know someone going through the same thing. It's there. But sometimes we just don't know what to do with it.
You know, it's a couple things. I want to mention someone else. Johnny Clark is probably one of the most advocates for black empowerment that I know. I mean, from the time that I met him, probably why we're so close. We take him different paths, but he comes born and raised out of Houston in the Deep South. He's old enough to go through all those changes early on in the military. A lot of our conversations is always surrounded around empowerment of our people and building it. But I think that going back to what you said is not knowing what to do with it is because as we become this individualistic people.
Yeah.
We become individualistic, which is not our nature because we're collective. And when we become individualistic, then you don't reach out. You know, you think that you have to do it all by yourself. That's just you. So, and you don't know what to do with it because it's so massive. The struggle is so massive that we don't see beyond who we are and not realize that there's powers in numbers.
Right.
It doesn't mean that we all have to think the same way exactly or do the same things. It just kind of goes back to moving in the same direction and understanding that there are different powers. I think that's when the light bulb came on. Is that it's not about me as an individual.
Right. It's about us as a collective.
It's us as a collective. So, you know, thinking of Think Black, it's that's the whole purpose. Which, by the way, she's the first sister that I've seen of Think Black on a T-shirt, and I asked her for permission to use it. So, I wanted to say that. But it's understanding that we have to move beyond individualism.
Yes.
And move into collectivism, if that's a word. Is that a word, Bob?
Collectivism and communalism, because we're communal people. It's like, and excuse me for interrupting that part, but I want to throw this in right where you were, because it's like you say, we're part of the whole, we're just one piece of the whole. And when I was first introduced to communalism, I'm not going to get into the political side. I will say this little tidbit. I think that there's a reason that communism is a bad thing, but it may not actually be. But I'm not going to go there right now. That's a different word. But communalism is potluck. You know, if we all come into a dinner and it's potluck, we don't want one person to just come with the carrots. You know what I'm saying? We're going to sit up and eat carrots all night, but one person brings the carrots. Somebody else brings the potatoes. Somebody else brings the beans. Somebody brings the bread. That's potluck. That's communalism. That's what we are. We work together better as a collective
Yes.
than we do when we're alone. We work together better when we unify.
Any other questions?
Yes, I had a question for Baba Baruti. And that is, it's been my pleasure and honor to know Donald for a nice period of time. One thing that I've always been able to say about him is he's always been a seeker. There was someone who gave him that title at one point. And I really resonated with that specifically to Donald, because I believe that just in his multiple efforts and so many different things, and the readings that he talked about from a young age, the questioning, that's something that I've always seen, and it resonates so